Hello everyone, welcome to my channel and to another video. Today's video is going to be about the third debate in the primary election for the Ohio 11th Congressional District race in which Nina Turner is running. So there have been a lot of developments in this race so far with everything from Hillary Clinton endorsements to the DSA campaign to help Nina Turner get elected. And I'm planning on making a video about that very soon, so please subscribe to get that content and ring the bell. Also, leave a like and comment down below about what you think about the video. One of the main developments in the campaign so far has been that there has been released a poll in which Nina Turner is leading the other candidates pretty substantially, with 50% for her and 15% for the nearest rival, Shontel Brown. On the basis of this, I've made the decision only to include their answers in my supercut of the debate. Let's watch together.
Hello and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland, where we are devoted to conversations of consequence that help democracy thrive. I'm Dan Maltrup. I'm the chief executive here. I'm a proud member, and I'm really delighted to have all of you with us today. It's Tuesday, June 22nd. We're here for a special virtual City Club forum featuring the Ohio 11th District Democratic primary debate.
I do thank you, Dan, for the introduction, and I thank all of the candidates for being here tonight for this vitally important debate. Ms. Brown?
Thank you, City Club. Thank you for hosting this event today. I am Shontel Brown, and I am currently a county council representative for the 9th District. I am also the Democratic Party chairperson, the only candidate in this race with any legislative experience during some of the most troublesome and turbulent times in our nation's history. And I didn't just wake up and decide I wanted to go to Congress, nor am I trying to fulfill a lifelong fantasy of becoming the next congressional member. What I am doing is hoping to represent the people of 11th Congressional District. I have a record, a resume, and the relationships to deliver and to continue delivering the results for the people in the 11th Congressional District. So I am asking you for your support today to send Shontel Brown to Congress to keep getting things done for the 11th Congressional District. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Turner?
Thank you, City Club. It's such a pleasure to be here with you tonight. I am Nina Turner. I am a daughter of the city of Cleveland, a daughter of this district. I have served this district in many capacities. I am running to be a voice for change, to uplift the downtrodden, including the poor, the working poor, and the barely middle class. You send me to Congress, I am going to make sure that we tax the wealthy, make them pay their fair share, and to center the people who need it the most in this district. You will always know whose side I'm standing on. The most important thing for this district is to ensure that the people who are left behind are no longer left behind, and that the body politic of this nation bends towards the will of the people who absolutely need it the most. I'm Nina Turner, and I am running for Congress to be your voice for change.
Okay. We will dive right in with a question that came from the public. Just a year ago, protests and clashes with police dominated the city streets and the headlines, and the repercussions have reverberated since. This is the case in the country and certainly the case in Cleveland. I'm going to ask this of a couple of you, and I'm going to start with Mr. Johnson. What, if you are elected, police reforms would you advocate at the federal level? And what should be done at the federal level to support and enforce local reforms? Ms. Turner, your thoughts?
Yeah, just to add some finer points, I do agree with everything that my colleagues have just said. We need true transformation, and the challenges of policing is bigger than policing. This is about a system that actually sees the poor, Black, brown, indigenous, people of color somehow more criminal and different. So policing is just a microcosm of larger problems in this society that we absolutely must deal with. So definitely I agree with the George Floyd Justice Act. I want to make sure that we have no more private prisons or immigration centers. I don't think that companies should be able to make a profit off of other people's misery. In terms of police or other law enforcement agencies, I believe that psychological testing should happen for law enforcement on a regular basis, not to be punitive, but it is a stressful profession. I have people in my family who are in policing and also former law enforcement as well, and I know how challenging it is. And to make sure that we uplift the fact that the system itself must not see people of color as somehow different than others. I do agree. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to move to another question that was key among members of the public who submitted them. The Cleveland area has been living with wide health disparities for decades. The average lifespan in Lyndhurst, for example, is 12 years longer than in Glenville. And then came COVID. From death rates to hospitalizations, people of color suffered more widely and severely. And the latest example of health inequities throughout America. What must Congress do to close the healthcare gap? Ms. Brown, your thoughts on what Congress specifically can do to lessen the gap?
Thank you. As it relates to healthcare, certainly moving towards a public option to ensure that everyone who lives in this country has access to affordable, high-quality healthcare. Healthcare is something that we all deserve and should not be determined by our economic situation. So I also want to state on the record that if Medicare for All came up for a vote, I would be supportive of this. But in addition to that, I've led the initiative in Cuyahoga County to declare racism as a public health crisis because of our infant mortality rates, which were third world with first-class hospitals. So a lot of this is systemic and institutional racism that has had a disparate impact on communities of color, specifically Black communities. So we need someone not only with the courage to be able to ask for more, but to be able to work collaboratively with the members of Congress and the administration to deliver a program and a policy that provides quality health care for all of the people in our country.
You just mentioned that you would support Medicare for all. I'll ask first for just a show of hands of all of the candidates. Who among you supports Medicare for all? Ms. Turner, could you talk a little bit more about, to say Medicare for all, what in your mind is the ideal? What does that involve?
The ideal is to make sure that everybody in this country has health care. I mean, it is really asinine that in the wealthiest country on the face of the earth, we're debating about whether or not people deserve, and saying that somebody would vote for it if it came to the floor versus leading on it is two different things. 1 million people in the great state of Ohio lost their employer-sponsored health care, but the pandemic has shown it ripped away all of the doubt about having a commodified healthcare system. And because we're the wealthiest country on the face of the earth, we should ensure we are the only industrialized nation that does not have some type of universal healthcare. And when Medicare for all was first envisioned, it was envisioned as a system for all. No more copays, no more deductibles, no more premiums. And no one suffers the most than the poor, the working poor, and the barely middle class, and we do not have a universal healthcare system that will be able to lift people. And oh, by the way, that type of system also helps businesses too. So it's something that we must do in the United States of America.
Thank you. I do want to ask a follow-up on that. Do you see any role for private insurance in the system?
I mean, for the extra things that people may want beyond, the cosmetic kind of things, but it's not. The government will not control the healthcare itself in terms of you will still be able to go to your own doctor. It's just how it is paid for. So it's a misnomer that people won't get a chance to pick their own doctors. They will continue to pick their own doctors. And the system as it were, we're sicker and we pay more as a country. So the employer-based system, the commodification of healthcare does not work in the United States of America. Almost 100 million people are either underinsured or uninsured right now.
Thank you. Ms. Brown, could you talk about Medicare for all and what in your mind that means?
First of all, I want to address the comment about voting. This is what we are called to do, and leading on legislation is very important. And I think that the public option is a way that we can get to a more universal health care faster, more effectively, more immediately. So yes, I also agree. We all deserve to be able to have access to high quality health care. And again, as a person who has had the opportunity and the responsibility of dealing with legislation in some of the most turbulent and troublesome times in our nation's history, we are in a unique position where we have a slim majority with the Democrats here in DC, but that won't always be the case. So we have to be practical and pragmatic in how we approach some of these issues so that we can get to real results and not just rhetoric.
Hey, thank you all. Another topic that was elevated, escalated the concerns during the pandemic is education. The pandemic disrupted all levels. Enrollment in preschools, especially among African American, Hispanic, and lower income children, dwindled. Concern about lost learning lingers. Low income students dominate the pandemic's college enrollment decline. Please discuss, and I'm going to start with you, Mr. Shabazz. Please discuss one significant step that Congress could take to help education recover. And Ms. Brown, you had your hand raised. I'm actually able to focus on 9 screens at once now. Did you want to respond to the education question?
Well, to the point again that was made about, first of all, declaring racism as a public health crisis and in response to putting things to a vote. Clearly, some of us don't know how legislation works because we're not elected officials. And so everything that we discuss doesn't necessarily have to come to a vote, but if it does, I would be in support of that. Additionally, the fact that we were able to successfully pass legislation to declare racism as a health crisis with bipartisan support is demonstrative of a fact that we are acknowledging an issue, a historical issue that has plagued our society for centuries. So we're not going to fix it overnight, but we're certainly in a better position because of the work that I've been able to do. So thank you very much.
Let's see, I think just about now, the Senate is taking up Joe Manchin's voting rights bill, or the debate over a voting rights bill. I'll get to Mr. Corey in a moment. It is not the bill that passed the House. It does, however, make voter registration automatic, set election day as a holiday, require at least 15 days of early voting for federal elections, and it prohibits partisan gerrymandering, though it also requires voter IDs. This is a plan that former President Obama today endorsed. And I would like to ask you, while this is in the Senate, what do you think has the best chance of getting through the entire Congress, and what would you support? Okay, that says Ms. Turner, I'd ask your thoughts not only on voting rights, but on the filibuster. I know that's a different body than you're running for, but there's interaction, hopefully, between both houses.
Yeah, definitely filibuster reform is an absolute. We're not going to get anything done without getting rid of the filibuster right away. It should be done. And when it comes to dealing with the Manchin bill, I don't know why the people are asked to compromise on something like that. We have to undo Shelby v. Holder. You know, the Supreme Court definitely put the ball back into the court of the Congress. We have almost 400 bills traveling legislatures all across this country. Ohio is one of them, where Republicans are scaling back elections or people's access to elections. So if we got Democrats compromising on it, what do we say to Republicans? So the For the People Act should pass. The John Lewis law should pass. Democrats should be standing and holding strong for voting rights. It is the reason why we right now control the presidency in both chambers of the Congress, is because people came out to vote in mass for Democrats. And what did they vote for? I'm glad you asked. They asked for changes in their material conditions. And one thing that we cannot do is be the party that is standing up to scale back access to the ballot box. I don't think we should give in on that.
Ms. Brown?
Thank you. I understand what it takes to get things done. We have to be able to compromise so we can get some things done. The stalemates that we continue to see in DC are the very reasons why we are in the predicament that we are in. We need people, again, we're in a slim majority now, but what happens when we aren't? What happens when the Republicans are in the majority? Do we just reverse course on everything and every progress and every step that we've made? No. So we have to be able to work collaboratively and figure out how to get things done so that we can have legislation and policy that's built to last, not just some short-term quick fix because we have the majority. So I understand what it takes to compromise, and I support Manchin's negotiations and what he was able to get done. And then we come back to the table and negotiate and put forth another piece of legislation to address the things that we weren't able to do potentially in this bill.
Ms. Brown, could you private prisons have become big employers in rural communities, but also in places like Youngstown, economically distressed and looking for alternatives. How do you stand on the use of private prisons at the federal level?
I do not support private prisons. I don't support the federal level having private prisons. It's one of those things that, again, is systemic, it's oppressive. It is very much impacting communities of color, particularly people that look like me. And so to be able to profit off of people in prison is definitely wrong. And I don't believe that we should be funding private prisons with our federal dollars private prisons should not be a thing that exists. And certainly as a legislator at the federal level, I would oppose that vehemently. It just goes against everything that I stand for.
Ms. Turner, your thoughts?
Definitely private prisons should not exist, nor should private immigration detention centers. I will say what I've said before, that the private sector should not be able to make a profit off of other people's misery. Not at all. And we've been doing that for far too long in the United States of America. And one of the ways that we can kind of transition those workers, because I know that the concern is jobs. What happens to those folks who work in those facilities? Well, the greening of America and the Green New Deal is one way to put people back to work in jobs that will pay more than a living wage. And we have so much work that needs to be done in this district, in this state, and also in this nation, but no private prisons. What is done in the name of the people matters. And in our name, we should not give tax dollars to people to make profit off of other people's miseries. No more private prisons and no more private detention centers.
Dr. Corey?
Yes, I would be concerned about the privatization of prisons, because there would be a failure, I think, in transparency as well as accountability. We need to do much better in reforming our judicial system so that individuals, when they serve their time, can be reinstituted in society and be productive. And I'd be concerned that having a private enterprise would prevent that transparency or accountability. It's bad enough with federal and government prisons, let alone getting it into private hands.
Mr. Shabazz, you wanted to respond?
I actually wanted to be able to address the reparations question, considering I'm one of the only candidates who advocates for it heavily. Specifically, I will fight and advocate for reparations for the descendants of slavery. As we can check the history, which is very important for us to be educated on this process. And we saw the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, where we saw restitution was paid for the Japanese Americans that were held in the internment camps, as well as we saw how Abraham Lincoln was ordered to implement economic recovery for slave owners in the Emancipation Proclamation, the DC Act, which was signed into law. Okay, so, and I would like to address the privatized prison system specifically. Privatized prison industries are predicated on the basis of the financial status of businesses. So they're profiting off of the incarceration of people. So it's absolutely abhorrent, and I've admittedly opposed them. And specifically, as your next congressman, I will fight to make sure that we remove privatized prison systems and we actually have a complete overhaul of the criminal justice system in general. Because again, we are forcing people into these cells instead of actually just putting more resources into the communities, such as, like I stated before, again, how we see people trying to put $400 million into new jails instead of putting $400 million into lifting up those communities. That's what happens all the time in these communities. They leave them behind, neglect them, don't give them the resources, and then put them in the prison cells when they can't actually provide for themselves or their families. That's a problem.
Thank you. Ms. Smith. Okay, thank you. Ms. Turner, we talked earlier about some of the frustrations and horrible issues that emerged from the pandemic. But what initiatives were either implemented or expanded during the COVID crisis that you think should become a longer-term part of how our nation runs, how it operates?
In terms of the Biden administration's, the COVID relief package which was $1.9 trillion. In that package was the child tax credit. And, parents are going to be receiving relief. And through that, just that one portion of that policy change, cutting childhood poverty in half. Now, the thing about very good, excellent, I definitely support it, but it is temporary. So I would like to see that made permanent, and that we as a nation expand that, because if we can cut childhood poverty in half, we might as well go all the way and cut it 100%, and to make sure that that kind of thing is permanent. It also shows, as by way of example, that with that bill, that poverty is a policy choice. So we can make new choices through public policy and eradicate poverty. As the wealthiest nation on the face of the earth, there is absolutely nothing that we cannot do. If we reimagine and really have a willingness for transformation, we can get this done and eradicate poverty in the United States of America.
Thank you. Mr. Shabazz, what came out of the pandemic as a public policy that you think should be continued and or expanded?
I want to say I give a nod to my colleague Nita Turner on some of the things she stated, definitely. But I also want to add specifically is that more of the collaborative efforts to actually really treat and prevent the poverty as she addressed is a policy direction. That's the reason what it is. So what are some of the things that we could do about that specifically? Again, we need to be investing into these communities. We can no longer go on this pathway where we allow these individuals to just eat and fight and survive. People are in survival mode in these streets. When you look outside, people are dying and being killed all over this country. And what's happening is we are going to keep allowing these situations to fester and keep permeating. But reality-wise, we need a leader in this position, because we are in the civil rights era. As you see right now, you see all these anti-protest bills, these anti-voting bills. We're looking at an increased amount of oppressive techniques to actually impede on actual progress. And I know that some of my colleagues here, they don't want to rock the boat. But listen, the boat always will rock on the water. And I've been on a ship before. If I have to go through the rough seas of oppression to get progress, I will always fight for progress. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Corey, what did you see come out of the pandemic that you think should be continued, expanded?
I saw a lot of panic in pandemic. This question and the previous question dealing with substance abuse, I think, indicates the need to think differently. The government programs on war against drugs and the war on poverty over the past 6 years have been failures. We need better public health authorities in guiding policy. We need to restore, surprisingly, confidence of the people in the Centers for Disease Control, the National Institutes of Health. And one way is to be honest with the American people. And I don't think that there was so much honesty, but rather polarization, which exacerbated the terrible COVID pandemic. So those were, I think, teaching lessons. And there's disparity in addition to the physical issue. And there's psychological isolation that's associated with both substance abuse as well as the pandemic. I say, and I think this really gives us some thought as to who should be leading this country and who should be relying upon, whether it should be lawyers or whether it should be healthcare workers, who can put their voice into how the policy is made and to avoid the extremes of polarization. The lockdown has been catastrophic for so many people. The obesity, suicide, drug overdoses, the 30% of small businesses that have went bankrupt. This indicates that health is really a complex issue that is dealt with politically as well.
Thank you. Ms. Smith, did you see something coming out of the pandemic that you believe should become a permanent and or expanded part of U.S. federal policies?
Yes, I did. And that was awareness. Awareness how our government has failed us for so many years and refused to do something about it. And not only refused to do something about it, but act like it wasn't happening. I think that instead of maintaining some of these programs, I think that we should find a way to be more proactive in what we have found and what we have become more aware of. So I think looking at it in those terms, we can stay ahead of the ball or ahead of the game and make sure that we don't have to see all of this poverty and sickness and disparities in health, and also our kids lagging behind in education without any resources. So we see that now. We see how the child care centers really help and aid us and help women stay in the workforce. So that awareness have brought us to a light that I hope will shine forever, and our government will no longer fail us in these things.
Mr. Johnson, the infrastructure bill is still being negotiated. There's still hope for some kind of compromise on it. One of the biggest infrastructure programs that the nation ever got involved in was the interstate highway system. And while that has many, many people who give it a lot of support and plaudits, it also managed to segregate cities within themselves, cut off a number of neighborhoods, especially African-American neighborhoods. What should be done to ensure any new infrastructure plan benefits minority communities?
Thank you. I am excited that we have an administration that looks at things through this lens of equity and inclusion. And also the fact that we have Secretary Judge at the table who already put in a request to invest billions of dollars towards our internet crisis that we experience with the lack of broadband internet services throughout the nation. I also believe that we should be using these resources to address our lead pipes. These are things that are being discussed. These are necessary things, and these are things that will definitely continue to have a positive effect and reverse some of the decades of deterioration and discrimination in communities of color and low-income communities that have had inferior products and materials installed into our communities. And so we need someone who will be able to be a partner, not a puppet, but a partner, to be able to work with the administration to negotiate, to ensure that we are getting the resources that we need in the 11th Congressional District. And the fact of the matter is I'm best positioned to do that.
Ms. Turner, what are your thoughts?
Well, it is encouraging to see what the administration is doing. Definitely, the federal government was complicit in creating some of the systemic challenges that we are facing right now. None of these challenges are new. So it is absolutely important that communities of color, particularly African-American community, not only be at the table, but the resources as they are being permeated throughout our community, that those resources are laser focused into making sure that communities of color actually get those, that they actually get the jobs. I mean, a lot of times when that money is flowing through, the community does not necessarily get a chance to benefit. Once upon a time, and I'm sure that Senator Johnson remembers this, Senator Smith, and probably Representative Barnes too, we had the Fannie M. Lewis law in the city of Cleveland. And that law, under the leadership of Councilwoman Fannie M. Lewis, was designed to ensure that when tax dollars come through, the people's money comes through, that the residents of the city of Cleveland actually get a chance to benefit through having jobs. I would like to see that kind of law, that kind of policy position be permeated through not only the 11th Congressional District, but throughout the country to ensure that taxpayers' dollars are laser focused on the communities that need them most, not just in the infrastructure, but also in them having the jobs.
Thank you. The 11th District, I think I've heard Dr. Corey mention both Akron and Cleveland, and some people may not know the shape of that district as it is today, but it does stretch from Cleveland through the inner ring suburbs and down to Akron. Those communities have a lot in common, but they also have a lot of differences. So I'm going to ask this of all of you. If you're in Washington, how do you ensure representation of that very stretched out community while you're in DC? And I would ask you to start, Ms. Turner.
Well, definitely ensuring that the citizens in the Akron part of the district feel very much a part. I'm the only candidate who has an office in the Akron area right now. I've dealt with and been in the Akron community, even though electorally it definitely was not, I didn't represent that area, but civically I've been there. Want to make sure that we have many community meetings bringing both parts of the 11th Congressional District together on a regular basis. That is vitally important. And so as the next member of Congress, I will definitely ensure that the Akron area has strong staffing, just as the Cleveland area as well. And it is important that we rise or fall together in the entire district. And I certainly have heard from many people in the Akron area that somehow they feel left out. Redistricting definitely caused a lot of havoc. People in the Akron area, unfortunately, have 4 Congress people. So gerrymandering is a problem, and it is something that Ohio is one of the worst gerrymandered states, and I fear that it is going to get worse. But it's definitely making sure that both communities feel as though they are one.
Ms. Brown.
Thank you. I do have an Akron office, 501 Kelly Street, Kelly Avenue, and I will continue to build alliances and relationships in both Akron and Summit County. I'm proud to say of all the candidates, I have over 100 local elected officials who have endorsed my candidacy within the district, and that's including Summit as well as Cuyahoga County. And these are people that are already closely connected to the ground, in addition to over 50 prominent clergy members in the African American community and over a dozen unions throughout the district that have supported my candidacy. So keeping those lines of communication open and working collaboratively with them, as I've been doing, is something that I would continue to do if I am so fortunate to be the next representative of the 11th Congressional District. So I too believe that keeping that relationship strong will be imperative, not only now, but in the future, even after the lines will be redrawn.
Now, I have to address Councilwoman Brown in terms of all the support you got from the elected officials. I would assume that if I was the Democratic chair, I would get that same support. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was fine.
Go ahead. 30 seconds.
I guess I would assume if I had decades of experience, I could earn that same support. But I've been working hard with those folks for the last 9 years to earn their support. They do not have owe me anything for that support that I've earned. I'm indebted to them as the chair. I serve the people in those positions that have supported me, not the other way around, but thank you for the compliment.
We haven't run out of questions, but we have run out of time for the questions portion of our session. And so now we're going to move to the closing statements. Again, those were drawn at random, and the candidates will each have 45 seconds to deliver those final statements. So Ms. Brown, would you begin?
Yes, thank you very much for doing this. I just want to remind the people that this is a rich legacy that we're looking to fulfill. We need someone with the courage of a Louis Stokes, who demanded that we have reflective representation in our government, and I have done that when I declared racism as a public health crisis. We need someone with the connection to the community of a Stephanie Tubbs Jones, who could get into any room, from the penthouse to the projects, from the streets to the suites, to make sure she had a seat at the table so that we were not on the menu, and I've been doing that. We need someone with the competence, character, and compassion of a Marcia Fudge, who has elevated to the Secretary of HUD, and I have that. So I'm asking you to vote for someone who has the resume, the record, and the relationships to deliver the results. This is a fight for the future. I'm Shontel Brown, and I'm asking for your support. Thank you.
Nina Turner.
When I think about running for this office, many things enter my mind, but definitely the memory of my mother, who died at a young age of 42 years old with her dreams deferred. Many of you familiar with the poet Langston Hughes, when he asked a very important question: what happens to a dream deferred? I am running to ensure that the residents of the 11th Congressional District, from Greater Cleveland to Greater Akron, that very few people have to ask that question about what happens to a dream deferred. I have the vision to help to provide provision for the poor, the working poor, and the barely middle class from all walks of life. I do believe, similarly, in the words of Booker T. Washington, that there are two ways of exerting one's strength. One is by pushing down, and the other is by pulling up. You need to have somebody that will lead this community, who does have a vision, that understands being a partner does not mean being a puppet, that working with does not mean acquiescing to. So vote for Nina Turner for Congress, ninaturner.com. You will always know whose side I am on. My first, second, third, fourth, and fifth concern are the residents of the 11th Congressional District.
So that was the debate. Pretty interesting in my opinion. And I felt like in this debate the differences between the candidates became more stark, with Nina Turner throwing some barbs at Shontel Brown for being a corporate Democrat and going for small solutions instead of big structural change. And I also felt like Shontel Brown was more on the attack mode on Nina Turner, probably trying to close her great lead by talking about her plans as unrealistic, and that Nina Turner is incapable of working with other Democrats, like for instance the Biden administration. I also think that the debate had sort of a higher level of confrontation between the different candidates. And you saw that little clip of Shirley Smith making a very, very open attack on Shontel Brown. Doesn't seem like much of the field likes her that much. But Nina Turner's answers, I feel like they were eloquent and just as you expect from her, bold and visionary. So all in all, I'm very happy about this debate on behalf of Nina Turner. But that's only my opinion. What do you think? Comment down below and let me know. And also remember to subscribe, ring the bell and like the video to get the latest content. I like covering news and politics online, and I hope you like watching and stick around on the channel. Thank you all and goodbye.